I honestly believed Rachel was a loyal wife until I overheard her talking to her friends about me. That conversation changed everything. She was describing intimate details of our marriage to complete strangers, laughing about things I thought were private between us. But that wasn't even the worst part. My name is Jack Ellis, and I'm 38 years old. I work as an architect for a mid-sized firm in Hartford, Connecticut. Nothing fancy, just commercial buildings and the occasional residential project. I met Rachel 4 years ago at a real estate conference where she was working as a commercial agent. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room, which I later learned was just her sales technique. Rachel was the type of woman who made you believe in loyalty, mostly because she lied so well you never saw the knife coming. She had blonde hair that she spent $200 maintaining every month, green eyes that could convince you to buy a timeshare in hell, and a smile that made grown men forget their own names. I should have known better. We'd been married for 2 years when everything fell apart. Our house was a modest colonial in West Hartford, nothing extravagant but comfortable enough for 2 people building a life together. Rachel had insisted on the neighborhood because it was where successful people lived. I should have paid attention to that comment. The night it all started was a Thursday in October. Rachel announced she was going out for girls' night with her friend Zoe, something she'd been doing more frequently over the past few months. She spent an hour getting ready, which seemed excessive for drinks with a girlfriend, but I didn't say anything. Marriage had taught me to pick my battles. "Don't wait up, honey," she said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was different, something expensive I didn't recognize. "Zoe's going through a rough divorce, so we might be out late talking." I poured myself a whiskey and settled into my basement workshop. I was restoring an old wooden desk I'd found at an estate sale, something to keep my hands busy while my mind wandered. The house felt different when Rachel wasn't there, quieter, but somehow more peaceful. Around 9:30, I heard her phone ringing upstairs. She'd forgotten it on the kitchen counter, which was unusual since Rachel treated that device like a life support system. I figured I'd answer it in case it was important, maybe Zoe calling about their plans. But when I picked up the phone, I realized the call was already connected. Rachel must have answered from her car using Bluetooth, and somehow the call was coming through both devices. I could hear her voice clearly, along with another woman's voice I recognized as Zoe's. "I swear Jack is so clueless," Rachel was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she thought she was being clever. "He actually believes I'm out with you tonight. The man is too trusting for his own good." My blood went cold. I should have hung up, but something kept me listening. "Where are you really going?" Zoe asked, and I could hear the excitement in her voice, like she was living vicariously through whatever Rachel was about to say. "Meeting Brent at that new hotel downtown. He booked us a suite for the night. Jack thinks I'll be home by midnight, but I won't be back until morning. I'll just tell him I crashed at your place because I had too much wine." The whiskey glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the concrete floor. Brent. I knew exactly who she was talking about. Brent McKay owned a luxury car dealership on the other side of town. I'd met him at a few social events, and he had that aggressive confidence that some women found attractive. Apparently, my wife was one of them. "Are you sure Jack doesn't suspect anything?" Zoe asked. Rachel laughed, a sound that cut through me like broken glass. "Jack? Please. The man designs buildings for a living. He's methodical and boring. He couldn't catch me cheating if I brought Brent home and did it on the kitchen table. Besides, he's so grateful to have a wife like me, he'd never question anything I do." I fumbled for my phone and started recording the conversation. My hands were shaking, but I managed to capture the rest of their discussion. Rachel went into explicit detail about her relationship with Brent, how long it had been going on, and how easy it was to deceive me. "The best part," Rachel continued, "is that Jack actually thinks we're happy. He brings me coffee in bed every morning and tells me how lucky he is. If he only knew that while he's designing his little buildings, I'm planning my next afternoon with Brent." The call ended, and I stood in my basement, holding a phone that felt like evidence of my own stupidity. 2 years of marriage, and I'd been living with a stranger. Every morning coffee, every I love you, every intimate moment had been a performance. I spent the next hour pacing around the basement, trying to process what I'd heard. Part of me wanted to call Rachel immediately and confront her, but a larger part wanted to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. If she could lie so easily about tonight, what else had she been lying about? I went upstairs and found Rachel's tablet on her nightstand. She'd never been careful about passwords, always using the same combination of her birthday and mine. The device unlocked immediately, and I started looking through her messages. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. There wasn't just one affair with Brent. There was a group chat with Zoe and 2 other women, all of them married, all of them cheating, and all of them treating it like a game. They called themselves the Escape Artists and shared detailed stories about their affairs, complete with photos and videos. Rachel had been cheating on me for over a year, not just with Brent, but with at least 2 other men. She'd documented everything like she was keeping a diary, complete with ratings and comparisons. I was mentioned frequently, always as the clueless husband who worships the ground she walks on. One message from 3 weeks earlier made my stomach turn. Jack surprised me with dinner reservations at that expensive place downtown. Sweet, but all I could think about was how Brent took me there last month, and we ended up in the bathroom. Same restaurant, same table, but Jack will never know he was eating where his wife got fucked by another man. I screenshotted everything, every message, every photo, every cruel comment about our marriage. By the time I finished, I had enough evidence to destroy her in any divorce proceeding, but that didn't feel like enough. She'd made me into a joke, a pathetic figure who existed solely for her amusement. I called my oldest friend Ray, who owned an auto repair shop downtown. We'd grown up together in East Hartford, back when the neighborhood was still working class and people looked out for each other. Ray had always been suspicious of Rachel, though he'd been too polite to say anything directly. "Jack, it's almost midnight. What's wrong?" "I need your help with something," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you meet me at your shop in an hour?" "This about Rachel? How did you know?" "Lucky guess. I'll be there." Ray's shop was in an industrial area that was quiet at night. He was waiting for me when I arrived, smoking a cigarette and leaning against his tow truck. Ray was built like a linebacker, with graying hair and hands that were permanently stained with motor oil. He'd been married and divorced twice, both times because his wives cheated on him. "Let me guess," he said before I could speak. "You found out she's screwing around." I showed him the screenshots and played the recorded conversation. Ray listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Jesus, Jack. I'm sorry. I had suspicions, but this is worse than I thought." "I need to know how far this goes," I said, "and I need to make sure she doesn't see me coming." Ray nodded. "What do you want to do?" "First, I want to disable her car, something that looks like a breakdown but keeps her from getting home tonight. Then I want to follow her and document everything." "You sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no coming back." I thought about Rachel's laughter, about the way she'd described me as grateful and clueless. She made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Ray and I drove to the hotel where Rachel was meeting Brent. Her car was in the parking lot, a red BMW that I'd helped her pick out last year. Ray had me pull my truck around to block the security camera while he worked on her engine. "Nothing permanent," he explained as he disconnected something under the hood. "But she'll need a tow truck to get home. Should buy you some time." I parked across the street and waited. Around 2 a.m, Rachel and Brent came out of the hotel together. He was tall and tan with the kind of artificial confidence that came from money and good looks. They were holding hands and laughing about something. Rachel tried to start her car, but nothing happened. I watched Brent try to help, popping the hood and pretending he knew what he was looking at. After 20 minutes of failed attempts, Brent offered to drive her home. I followed them back to my house, staying far enough behind to avoid detection. Brent dropped Rachel off at the end of our driveway, and they spent several minutes in what appeared to be an intimate goodbye. I took photos of everything. Rachel came into the house around 3 in the morning, trying to be quiet. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, but I could smell Brent's cologne on her skin. She'd showered at the hotel, but she hadn't been thorough enough. The next morning, I brought her coffee in bed like always, watching her face as she spun her story about staying at Zoe's place and her car mysteriously breaking down. "The strangest thing happened," she said, sitting up and taking the mug from my hands. "My car just died in Zoe's driveway. I'll have to call a tow truck this morning." "That's terrible," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Good thing you had Zoe to help you out." "Yeah, she was great. Drove me home herself." I nodded and smiled, playing the role of the trusting husband one last time. But inside, I was already planning her destruction. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while gathering evidence and planning my next move. Rachel went about her routine as if nothing had happened, which somehow made it worse. She'd kiss me goodbye in the morning and tell me she loved me, then spend her lunch breaks texting Brent about their next encounter. I contacted Detective Harrington, a retired police officer who now worked as a private investigator. I'd met him through work when he consulted on a security project for one of our buildings. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I need help documenting my wife's affair," I told him during our meeting at a coffee shop downtown. "I want everything legal and admissible in court." Detective Harrington reviewed the evidence I'd already collected. "This is good work, Jack. You've got enough here to win any divorce proceeding. What else do you need?" "I want to know everything about Brent McKay. His business, his finances, his weaknesses. And I want to know if Rachel is planning to leave me for him." "That'll take about a week. My fee is $500 a day plus expenses." "Done." While Detective Harrington worked on the background investigation, I focused on Rachel's daily routine. I discovered she'd been meeting Brent at least twice a week, usually during her lunch break at a motel on the outskirts of town. They had a regular room, and the desk clerk recognized them as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. I also learned that Rachel's friend Zoe was more than just an enabler. She was actively helping coordinate the affairs, providing alibis, and even scouting new potential partners for the group. Zoe worked as a social media influencer, which gave her access to wealthy men looking for excitement. The breakthrough came when Detective Harrington called me with information about Brent's business practices. "Your wife's boyfriend has some serious problems," he said. "His dealership is behind on taxes, and he's been selling cars with undisclosed accident damage. Nothing criminal yet, but enough to ruin him if the right people found out." "What about his personal life?" "He's engaged to a woman named Ashley Morrison. She's the daughter of Morrison Construction, worth about $50 million. The engagement announcement was in the society pages last month." I felt a cold satisfaction wash over me. Rachel thought she was Brent's only secret, but she was just another side piece to a man who was planning to marry someone else for money. "There's more," Detective Harrington continued. "I've been monitoring their communications, and it looks like Brent is getting tired of Rachel. He's been avoiding her calls and making excuses to cancel their meetings." That evening, I tested Rachel's loyalty one more time. I came home with flowers and a bottle of expensive wine, telling her I wanted to celebrate our anniversary early. "What's the occasion?" she asked, accepting the flowers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've been thinking about how lucky I am to have you," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "I know I'm not the most exciting guy in the world, but you make me want to be better." Rachel's smile faltered for just a moment. "That's sweet, Jack. You know I love you too." "I was thinking we could take a vacation. Maybe Europe? We could visit those old cathedrals I'm always talking about." "Europe sounds wonderful," she said, but I could see her mind working. "When were you thinking?" "Next month. I already talked to my boss about taking time off." Rachel's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it quickly. I caught a glimpse of Brent's name on the screen. Actually, next month might be difficult, she said. I have some big deals closing at work. Maybe we could wait until after the holidays? Of course. Work comes first. That night, I checked Rachel's messages again. She'd immediately texted Brent about the vacation idea, asking if he wanted to take a trip together instead. His response was cold. Can't. Too busy with wedding planning. Rachel had texted back, wedding planning? Brent's reply was brutal. Ashley and I are getting married in December. I thought you knew. I watched Rachel's world crumble through text messages. She called Brent repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Finally, she sent a long message explaining how she'd been planning to leave me for him, how she'd been faithful to him while lying to her husband. Brent's final response was, I never asked you to leave your husband. This was just fun. Don't make it complicated. Rachel cried herself to sleep that night, and I lay next to her feeling nothing but contempt. She'd destroyed our marriage for a man who saw her as disposable entertainment. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. I'd taken the day off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency. In a way, that was true. First, I visited Rachel's office. She worked for Morrison Real Estate, which I now knew was owned by Brent's future father-in-law. I asked to speak with her supervisor, Harper Wells, a competitive woman in her 40s who'd never liked Rachel. I need to discuss something confidential about my wife, I told Harper in her private office. Is Rachel in some kind of trouble? I showed Harper selected screenshots of Rachel's group chat, focusing on the messages where Rachel bragged about sleeping with clients to close deals. Harper's face went white. This could destroy our reputation. We could lose our license. I'm not looking to hurt the company, I said, but I thought you should know what's been happening. What do you want me to do? That's up to you. I just thought you deserved the truth. I left Harper's office knowing that Rachel's real estate career was over. Harper was ambitious and wouldn't let Rachel's behavior threaten her own advancement. Next, I drove to Brent's dealership. It was a flashy operation with luxury cars arranged like jewelry in a showroom. Brent was easy to spot, standing near a red Ferrari and talking to a young couple about financing options. I waited until he was alone, then approached him directly. Brent McKay? That's right. Are you interested in a vehicle today? I'm Jack Ellis, Rachel's husband. Brent's confident expression faltered. He glanced around nervously, probably looking for security or an escape route. Look, I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and level. I've seen the messages, the photos, the hotel receipts. I know about the motel room you rent by the month. Brent tried to regain his composure. I don't know what your wife told you, but women like her, they get obsessed. They make things up. Women like her? Come on, man. You know what she is. She threw herself at me. I was just being polite. I stepped closer, and Brent backed up against the Ferrari. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to block her number and refuse to see her. If I find out you've had any contact with her, I'll send everything I know about you to Ashley Morrison. You can't prove anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of him and Rachel leaving the hotel together. I can prove everything. I can also prove you've been selling damaged cars without disclosure. How do you think that would look in the newspaper? Brent's face went pale. What do you want? I want you to disappear from our lives. Completely. And I want you to tell Rachel exactly why you're doing it. I left the dealership feeling satisfied, but not finished. Brent would cut ties with Rachel, but that was only the beginning of what I had planned. That evening, Rachel came home in tears. Brent had called her and ended their relationship, telling her that her husband knew everything and had threatened to destroy him. Jack, I need to tell you something, she said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table. I'm listening. I made a mistake. I've been seeing someone, but it's over now. It didn't mean anything, and I want to work on our marriage. I looked at her tear-stained face and felt nothing but disgust. Even now, she was lying. She wasn't sorry about the affair. She was sorry she'd been caught. "Who was it?" I asked. "It doesn't matter. He's married and we both realized it was wrong." "How long?" "A few months. Jack, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." "A few months," I repeated. "So this was recent?" Rachel nodded, probably thinking that minimizing the timeline would make it seem less serious. "That's interesting," I said, pulling out my phone. "Because according to these messages, you've been cheating on me for over a year with multiple men." I showed her the screenshots of her group chat, watching her face crumble as she realized how much I knew. "Jack, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain how you rated your lovers and compared them to your pathetic husband? Explain how you laughed about me with your friends?" Rachel started crying harder. "It wasn't like that. Those women, they influenced me. I got caught up in their lifestyle." "So this is their fault?" "No, it's my fault. But Jack, I love you. I want to save our marriage." I stood up from the table. "Our marriage ended the night you met Brent at that hotel. Everything since then has just been cleanup." "What does that mean?" "It means you should find somewhere else to sleep tonight. And tomorrow you should find a lawyer." I left Rachel sitting at the kitchen table and went to my basement workshop. I could hear her crying upstairs, making phone calls to her friends, trying to find someone who would tell her everything would be okay. But I knew better. This was just the beginning of her consequences. The next morning, Rachel was gone. She'd left a note saying she was staying with Zoe and wanted to give me space to think. What she really wanted was time to strategize, to figure out how to minimize the damage and salvage what she could from our marriage. I used her absence to accelerate my plans. First, I met with a divorce attorney recommended by Detective Harrington. Patricia Chen was a sharp woman in her 50s with a reputation for aggressive representation. "This is one of the most well-documented cases I've ever seen," she said, reviewing my evidence. "Your wife won't get anything beyond what Connecticut law requires, and even that will be minimal given her adultery." "I want to file immediately," I said, "and I want her served at work, in front of her colleagues." "That's certainly possible. Anything else?" "I want to freeze all joint accounts and change the locks on the house. Everything legal but immediate." "Consider it done." Next, I visited Mrs. Lefebvre, our elderly neighbor who spent most of her day watching the street from her front window. She was in her 70s, a retired teacher who missed nothing that happened in our neighborhood. "Jack, dear, I haven't seen Rachel in a few days. Is everything all right?" "Actually, Mrs. Lefebvre, I wanted to ask you about something. Have you noticed any unusual activity at our house? People coming and going when I'm not home?" Mrs. Lefebvre's eyes lit up. She'd been waiting for someone to ask about the things she'd observed. "Well, now that you mention it, there have been some strange cars in your driveway. A white Mercedes, usually on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. And that man who drives it, he doesn't look like your usual friends." "Can you describe him?" "Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes, very handsome, but in a sleazy way, if you know what I mean. He and Rachel seemed quite friendly." "How friendly?" Mrs. Lefebvre looked uncomfortable. "Jack, I don't like to gossip, but I saw them kissing in your driveway more than once. Would you be willing to write down what you've seen, dates and times?" "Of course, dear. I keep a diary of neighborhood activities. It's a habit from my teaching days." Mrs. Lefebvre's diary was incredibly detailed. She documented Brent's visits going back 8 months, including license plate numbers and descriptions of his behavior. She'd also noted other men visiting Rachel, creating a timeline that proved the affairs had been going on much longer than Rachel had admitted. That afternoon, I received a call from Nora, the administrative assistant at my office. Nora was in her 30s, divorced, and had always been friendly toward me. "Jack, I heard through the grapevine that you and Rachel are having problems," she said. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I think you should know." "What is it?" Rachel came by the office last week looking for you, but you were in a meeting. While she was waiting, she took a call from someone named Brent. I couldn't help overhearing parts of the conversation. What did she say? She was talking about leaving you. She said she was tired of pretending to be happy and that she'd found someone who appreciated her properly. She also said something about your savings account. My blood ran cold. What about my savings account? She was asking this Brent person about hiding money. Something about transferring funds before you noticed. I thanked Nora and immediately called my bank. My savings account, which had contained $40,000 the last time I checked, was down to $12,000. Rachel had been systematically draining our joint accounts for months. That evening, I drove to Zoe's apartment to confront Rachel directly. Zoe lived in a trendy complex downtown, the kind of place that attracted young professionals who wanted to feel sophisticated. I found Rachel's BMW in the parking lot and waited. Around 8 o'clock, Rachel and Zoe came out of the building dressed for a night out. They were laughing and seemed carefree, as if Rachel's marriage imploding was just a minor inconvenience. I followed them to an upscale bar called the Metropolitan, a place that attracted the city's social climbers and wannabe elite. Through the window, I could see Rachel and Zoe at a corner table with two other women I recognized from the group chat. I waited outside for 20 minutes, then walked into the bar and took a seat at the opposite end from Rachel's group. The bar was crowded enough that I could observe without being noticed. What I saw disgusted me. Rachel was holding court, telling her story as if she were the victim. She portrayed me as a controlling husband who'd discovered her friendship with Brent and overreacted. According to her version, she'd never cheated, just developed feelings for someone else and was trying to figure out what to do about it. Her friends were eating it up, offering sympathy and advice about how to handle the situation. One woman suggested that Rachel should demand alimony and half of everything I owned. Another recommended that she claim I'd been emotionally abusive to justify her behavior. The problem with men like Jack, Rachel said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, is that they think they own you. He can't accept that I might be attracted to someone more successful and exciting. I took out my phone and started recording. The bar was noisy enough that I could get close without being detected. Brent is everything Jack isn't, Rachel continued. Confident, wealthy, spontaneous. When I'm with Brent, I feel like the woman I was meant to be instead of some architect's boring wife. So why don't you just leave Jack? Asked one of her friends. Because I'm not stupid. Jack has money saved up and I contributed to our household too. I deserve half of everything plus support payments. My lawyer says I can get at least $3,000 a month in alimony. What about Brent? Is he going to leave his fiancée? Rachel's confident expression faltered. He's going through a complicated time right now. The engagement is just for business reasons. Once he sorts out his finances, we'll be together. I almost felt sorry for her. Rachel had no idea that Brent had already discarded her, and she was planning a future that would never exist. I stayed at the bar until Rachel's group left around midnight. As they walked to their cars, I heard Rachel making plans to meet with a different divorce attorney the next day, one who specialized in maximizing settlements for wronged wives. The next morning, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I called Harper at Rachel's office and asked if we could meet for lunch. I have some additional information about Rachel that might interest you, I said. We met at a restaurant near her office. Harper looked stressed, probably because she'd been dealing with the fallout from Rachel's behavior. I've been reviewing Rachel's client files, Harper said. If even half of what you showed me is true, we could face lawsuits from multiple clients. It's all true, but I have something else you should see. I showed Harper the bank records proving that Rachel had been stealing money from our joint accounts, along with credit card statements showing expensive purchases that didn't match her salary. Where do you think she got the money for these purchases? I asked. Harper studied the statements. These are all from stores where our clients shop. High-end boutiques, expensive restaurants. Rachel's been using client information to live a lifestyle she can't afford. Check your expense accounts. Harper's face went white. You think she's been stealing from the company? I think you should audit her accounts very carefully. I left Harper with copies of the financial records and drove to my next appointment. Detective Harrington had arranged a meeting with someone from the State Real Estate Commission, an investigator who specialized in license violations. Based on what you've shown me, the investigator said, Ms. Ellis has violated multiple professional standards, using client relationships for personal gain, misrepresenting her availability during business hours, and potentially stealing from her employer. What happens now? We'll open a formal investigation. If the allegations are substantiated, she'll lose her license permanently. That afternoon, Rachel was served with divorce papers at her office. According to Harper, who called me later, Rachel had screamed at the process server and caused such a scene that security had to escort her from the building. Rachel called me an hour later, hysterical and furious. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed into the phone. "I told you I made a mistake. I was trying to work things out." "You made a lot of mistakes, Rachel. I'm just making sure there are consequences. You can't freeze our bank accounts. I need that money. The money you stole, my lawyer will be in touch about that. I didn't steal anything. That's our money. Actually, most of it was my money. Money I earned while you were playing house with Brent." Rachel started crying. "Jack, please. We can fix this. I'll do anything." "There's nothing to fix. You destroyed our marriage, and now you're going to live with the results." "What about Brent? Did you threaten him?" "I didn't have to threaten him. I just told him the truth about what kind of person you are. You ruined everything." "No, Rachel, you ruined everything. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." That evening, I received a visit from Zoe. She showed up at my door around 9 o'clock, dressed in designer clothes and wearing an expression of righteous indignation. "You need to stop this," she said, before I could speak. "Rachel is my best friend, and you're destroying her life over a simple mistake." "A simple mistake?" She had feelings for someone else. That happens in marriages. But instead of working through it like an adult, you're trying to ruin her career and steal all her money. I invited Zoe inside, curious to see how far she would go to defend Rachel. "Let me ask you something, Zoe. Did you know Rachel was cheating on me?" I knew she was confused about her feelings, but cheating is a strong word. "What would you call it when a married woman has sex with multiple men in hotel rooms?" Zoe looked uncomfortable. "Relationships are complicated. You can't just reduce everything to black and white." "Actually, I can. Rachel made vows to me and she broke them, repeatedly, with your help. I never helped her do anything wrong." I showed Zoe screenshots of her own messages from the group chat, including ones where she'd helped arrange alibis and meeting places for Rachel's affairs. "This is you, isn't it? Helping my wife lie to me?" Zoe's confident demeanor cracked. "I was just being a supportive friend." "You were helping her destroy my marriage? And now you want me to pretend it never happened?" "I want you to forgive her. Rachel loves you, Jack. She made some bad choices, but she wants to come home. Rachel loves the security I provided. She loves having a husband who pays the bills while she plays with other men. That's not the same thing as love." Zoe stood up to leave. "You're making a mistake. Rachel is a good person who got caught up in a bad situation. Rachel is a selfish person who got caught. There's a difference." After Zoe left, I sat in my living room and looked around at the house Rachel and I had shared. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every shared memory felt contaminated by her betrayal. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. For the first time since discovering Rachel's affairs, I wasn't angry or hurt. I was simply determined to see justice done. Tomorrow, I would take the final steps to ensure that Rachel faced the full consequences of her choices. And after that, I would begin building a new life without her. The next morning brought news that accelerated my timeline. Detective Harrington called with an update that changed everything. "Jack, you need to hear this. I've been monitoring Rachel's communications like you asked, and she's planning something big. What kind of something? She's meeting with a lawyer today who specializes in domestic abuse cases. According to her messages with Zoe, she's going to claim you've been physically and emotionally abusive throughout your marriage. My blood ran cold. That's insane. I've never laid a hand on her. I know that, but she's desperate. Her real estate license is under investigation, Brent won't return her calls, and she's facing a divorce that will leave her with almost nothing. This is her nuclear option. What's her plan? She's going to file for a restraining order based on fabricated abuse claims. If she gets it, you'll be forced out of your own house, and it will complicate the divorce significantly. Even if the charges are eventually dropped, the damage to your reputation will be permanent. I felt a familiar cold rage building in my chest. Rachel wasn't content to destroy our marriage. She wanted to destroy my entire life. There's more, Detective Harrington continued. Zoe has been helping her stage evidence. They've been taking photos of Rachel with fake bruises, created using makeup techniques they found online. When is she filing? This afternoon. The lawyer advised her to do it quickly, before you have time to prepare a defense. I thanked Detective Harrington and immediately called my attorney. Patricia Chen was already aware of the situation. This is a common tactic in contentious divorces, she explained. False abuse allegations are difficult to disprove, and they can drag out proceedings for months. What can we do? We need to get ahead of this. I'm going to file an emergency motion with the court, presenting all the evidence of Rachel's affairs and financial misconduct. If we can establish her pattern of deception, it will undermine any abuse claims. Will that be enough? Probably, but we need more. Do you have any evidence that proves your whereabouts during the time she claims the abuse occurred? I thought about Mrs. Lefebvre's detailed diary. I might. Let me make some calls. I spent the morning gathering alibi evidence for every date Rachel might claim I'd been abusive. Mrs. Lefebvre's records showed that I'd been at work during most of the incidents Rachel was likely to fabricate. I also had credit card receipts, security footage from my office building, and witness statements from colleagues. But that wasn't enough. I needed to catch Rachel in the act of staging her fake evidence. I called Ray and explained the situation. His response was immediate and angry. That bitch is trying to frame you for domestic violence? After what she's done? I need to catch her creating the fake evidence. Can you help me set up surveillance? Absolutely. When and where? Detective Harrington had given me Rachel's schedule. She was meeting with her lawyer at 2 o'clock, then returning to Zoe's apartment to prepare for the filing. Based on her messages, that preparation involved creating additional fake bruises and taking more staged photos. Ray and I positioned ourselves outside Zoe's apartment building with a high-powered camera and recording equipment. At 3:30, Rachel's BMW pulled into the parking lot. Through Zoe's apartment window, we could see Rachel and Zoe setting up what looked like a photo shoot. They had professional makeup, lighting equipment, and multiple cameras. Rachel was posing in various positions, while Zoe applied fake bruises to her arms and face. This is unbelievable, Ray muttered, adjusting the camera focus. She's literally manufacturing evidence. I recorded everything. Rachel changing clothes to create different scenarios, Zoe coaching her on how to look more convincing, and both women laughing about how easy it would be to fool a judge. At one point, Rachel practiced crying on command while Zoe took photos. They were treating my potential imprisonment like a fun project. We need audio, I said. The photos are good, but we need to hear what they're saying. Ray pulled out a device that looked like a small satellite dish. This will pick up conversations through the window. It's not admissible in court, but it'll give us information we can use. The audio was crystal clear. Rachel and Zoe were discussing specific incidents they were going to fabricate, complete with dates, times, and detailed descriptions of alleged abuse. Remember, Rachel was saying, the key is to make it escalate over time. Start with emotional abuse, then move to pushing and shoving, then hitting. It has to seem realistic. What if Jack has alibis for some of these dates? Zoe asked. Then we'll change the dates. The important thing is to establish a pattern. Once the judge sees these photos and hears my testimony, Jack will be lucky if he doesn't go to jail. I felt sick listening to them casually discuss destroying my life. But I also felt something else. A cold determination to make sure they failed spectacularly. After 2 hours, Rachel and Zoe finished their photo session. They'd created dozens of images showing Rachel with various fake injuries, each one carefully staged to support their fabricated timeline. Ray and I followed Rachel to her lawyer's office, where she spent another hour presumably rehearsing her story. When she came out, she looked confident and satisfied, probably thinking she'd found the perfect way to escape the consequences of her actions. That evening, I met with Patricia Chen and Detective Harrington to review our evidence. The photos and audio recordings of Rachel staging fake abuse were devastating to her credibility. "This is exactly what we needed," Patricia said. "When Rachel files her restraining order tomorrow, we'll be ready with proof that she's committing perjury." "What happens to her when this comes out?" I asked. "Filing false police reports is a felony. She could face jail time, and it will destroy any remaining credibility she has in the divorce proceedings." Detective Harrington leaned forward. "There's something else you should know. I've been investigating Brent's business practices like you asked, and I found something interesting." "What?" "He's been running a money laundering operation through his dealership. Nothing huge, but enough to get him in serious trouble with the IRS and possibly federal authorities." "How does that help us?" "Brent's engagement to Ashley Morrison isn't just about love. Her father's construction company has been providing the dirty money that Brent's been cleaning through car sales. If that relationship falls apart, both men could face criminal charges." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "And if Ashley found out about Brent's affair with Rachel? The engagement would be off immediately. Ashley's not the type to forgive infidelity, and her father wouldn't want his business associated with a cheating scandal. Then I think it's time Ashley learned the truth about her fiancé." The next morning, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. While Rachel was at the courthouse filing her fake abuse claims, I was across town meeting with Ashley Morrison at her father's construction office. Ashley was everything Rachel wasn't: elegant, intelligent, and genuinely kind. She was also completely unaware that her fiancé had been cheating on her for over a year. "Mr. Ellis, I'm not sure why you wanted to meet with me," she said, sitting across from me in a conference room overlooking the city. "I have some information about Brent that I think you should know before your wedding." I showed Ashley selected evidence of Brent's affair with Rachel, focusing on the timeline and the explicit nature of their relationship. I also provided Detective Harrington's report on Brent's business practices. Ashley's face went pale as she reviewed the documents. "This woman is married?" "Yes, to me." "And Brent has been seeing her for over a year?" "Yes. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you deserved to know." Ashley was quiet for several minutes, studying the evidence with the careful attention of someone who'd grown up in the business world. "Why are you showing me this?" she finally asked. "Because you seem like a good person who doesn't deserve to be deceived. And because Brent and my wife destroyed my marriage. I want them to face consequences for their actions." Ashley nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing this to me. I'll handle it from here." 2 hours later, while Rachel was in court spinning her tale of domestic abuse, Ashley Morrison was at Brent's dealership ending their engagement in front of his employees and customers. According to Detective Harrington, who had contacts throughout the city, Ashley's confrontation with Brent was legendary. She'd arrived with 2 security guards and a lawyer, demanded the return of her engagement ring, and announced to everyone present that Brent was a cheating liar who'd been running a money laundering operation. By the time Ashley left, Brent's business was in ruins, his engagement was over, and federal investigators were already asking questions about his financial records. Meanwhile, Rachel's court appearance was going exactly as I'd hoped. When she presented her fake evidence and abuse claims, Patricia Chen was ready with our counter-evidence. The photos of Rachel staging fake bruises, combined with audio recordings of her discussing perjury, destroyed her credibility instantly. The judge was furious. Not only did he deny Rachel's request for a restraining order, he also ordered her arrest for filing false police reports and perjury. I was at home when Patricia called with the news. "Rachel has been arrested," she said. "She's being held pending a bail hearing tomorrow morning." "What about the divorce?" "With her credibility destroyed and evidence of her financial misconduct, we can expedite the proceedings. You should have a final decree within 30 days. That evening I received a call from Brent. His voice was shaky and desperate. "Jack, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, you've destroyed my life. My business is ruined, my engagement is over, and federal agents are asking questions about my finances." "You destroyed your own life. I just made sure people knew the truth." "What do you want? Money? I'll pay you whatever you want to make this stop." "I don't want your money, Brent. I wanted justice, and I got it. This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You're finished in this town, and everyone knows why. If I were you, I'd start looking for somewhere else to live." I hung up and poured myself a whiskey. Outside, it was starting to snow, and the city looked clean and peaceful under the white blanket. My phone rang again. This time it was Zoe, calling from the police station. "Jack, you have to help Rachel. She's in jail and they're talking about serious charges." Rachel made her choices. Now she's living with the consequences. She didn't mean for things to go this far. She was just scared and desperate. She was scared of losing the comfortable life I provided while she cheated on me. That's not the same thing as being a victim. What about forgiveness? What about second chances? Rachel had plenty of chances to be honest with me. She chose deception every time. Now she gets to experience the justice system she tried to abuse. You're heartless. I'm realistic. Rachel is a liar, a cheater, and now a felon. The only heartless thing would be pretending otherwise. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, the moment when Rachel would have to face the complete destruction of the life she'd built on lies. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep peacefully in my own house, free from the weight of deception and betrayal. The rabbit had become a wolf, and the hunt was almost over. The next morning brought news that exceeded my wildest expectations. Rachel's arrest had made the local newspaper's crime blotter, and word was spreading quickly through our social circle. The headline read, "Local real estate agent arrested for filing false police reports." Detective Harrington called me with updates throughout the morning. "The story is everywhere," he said. "Local news stations are picking it up, and social media is having a field day. Rachel's mugshot is being shared with commentary about false abuse allegations." "What about her bail hearing?" "Set for this afternoon. Her lawyer is trying to minimize the damage, but with the evidence we provided, she's looking at serious jail time." I drove downtown to observe the bail hearing. The courthouse was busier than usual, with several reporters and curious onlookers who'd heard about the case. Rachel's story had struck a nerve in the community, particularly among men who'd been falsely accused and women who'd been genuinely abused. Rachel looked terrible when they brought her into the courtroom. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was gone, and she was wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look small and defeated. This was a far cry from the confident woman who'd been mocking me just a week earlier. Zoe was in the gallery, along with a few other friends who still supported Rachel. But the courtroom was mostly filled with strangers who'd come to see the woman who'd tried to game the system. The prosecutor presented a devastating case. They had the photos and audio recordings of Rachel staging fake evidence, witness testimony about her character, and documentation of her financial crimes. They also revealed that Rachel had attempted to contact Brent from jail, trying to coordinate their stories. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "Ms. Ellis has shown a pattern of deception and manipulation that makes her a flight risk and a danger to the community. She attempted to weaponize the justice system against an innocent man, undermining the credibility of genuine abuse victims." Rachel's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, claiming that Rachel was a first-time offender who'd made mistakes during a difficult divorce, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Ms. Ellis," the judge said, looking directly at Rachel, "you have committed serious crimes that strike at the heart of our justice system. False allegations of domestic abuse not only harm the accused, but also make it harder for real victims to be believed." Bail was set at $50,000, an amount that Rachel couldn't afford. Her real estate license had been suspended, her bank accounts were frozen, and none of her remaining friends were willing to post bond for someone facing felony charges. As they led Rachel back to her cell, she looked directly at me for the first time. Her expression was a mixture of hatred and desperation, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. After the hearing, I was approached by a reporter from the local television station. "Mr. Ellis, would you be willing to comment on your wife's arrest?" "My soon-to-be ex-wife," I corrected. "And yes, I'll comment." The interview was brief but effective. I explained how Rachel had systematically cheated on me, stolen money from our joint accounts, and then tried to frame me for domestic abuse when she got caught. "The real tragedy," I said, looking directly into the camera, "is that there are genuine victims of domestic abuse who need help and protection. My wife's lies make it harder for those people to be believed." The interview aired on the evening news and was picked up by other stations throughout the region. By the next morning, Rachel's story had gone viral on social media, with thousands of people commenting on the case. The response was overwhelmingly negative toward Rachel. Women's rights groups condemned her for undermining real abuse victims. Men's rights activists used her case as an example of false allegations, and the general public was outraged by her attempt to manipulate the system. But the social media attention also brought unexpected consequences. Other people came forward with stories about Rachel's behavior, including former clients who claimed she'd overcharged them and colleagues who said she'd stolen their commissions. The State Real Estate Commission announced a comprehensive investigation into Rachel's professional conduct, and her former employer filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages for the reputation harm she'd caused. More importantly, Brent's situation continued to deteriorate. The federal investigation into his money laundering operation had uncovered connections to organized crime, and he was facing potential racketeering charges. His dealership had been shut down, and he was reportedly hiding from creditors and angry associates. 3 days after Rachel's arrest, I received a call from Ashley Morrison. "Mr. Ellis, I wanted to thank you for bringing Brent's behavior to my attention," she said. "I've learned things about him that go far beyond cheating. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Don't be. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I also wanted you to know that my father's company is cooperating fully with federal investigators. We had no knowledge of Brent's illegal activities." "I never thought you did." "There's something else. Brent has been trying to contact me, claiming that your wife seduced him and that he was the real victim. I thought you should know he's still lying about what happened." "That doesn't surprise me. Brent and Rachel deserve each other." "Actually, according to what I've heard, Rachel wants nothing to do with Brent now. She blames him for ruining her life." I almost laughed. Even facing felony charges and social humiliation, Rachel couldn't accept responsibility for her own actions. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Harper, Rachel's former supervisor, came to my house with a bottle of wine and a request. "I wanted to apologize," she said when I invited her inside. "I knew Rachel was trouble, but I didn't realize how much damage she was doing." "You couldn't have known about the affairs." "Maybe not, but I should have investigated her client relationships more carefully. We found evidence that she'd been stealing from the company for months." "How much?" "Over $30,000. She was padding expense accounts, inflating commissions, and charging personal purchases to company credit cards." Harper explained that Rachel's theft had put the entire real estate office under scrutiny. Several major clients had threatened to take their business elsewhere, and the company was facing potential lawsuits. "The irony," Harper said, is that Rachel was actually a talented agent when she wasn't busy scamming people. She could have had a successful career if she'd been honest. Rachel was never interested in earning success. She wanted to take shortcuts and let other people pay the price. Well, she's certainly paying the price now. The criminal charges are just the beginning. She's facing civil lawsuits from the company, from clients she defrauded, and from you in the divorce. After Harper left, I sat in my living room and reflected on how completely Rachel's life had collapsed. In less than 2 weeks, she'd lost her husband, her lover, her job, her freedom, and her reputation. Everything she'd worked to build had been destroyed by her own choices. But I wasn't finished yet. There was one final humiliation I wanted Rachel to experience, something that would ensure she never forgot the consequences of her betrayal. The next morning, I called Detective Harrington with a proposal. "I want to attend Rachel's sentencing hearing," I said, "and I want to give a victim impact statement." "That's your right. When is the hearing scheduled?" "Next week. Her lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor isn't interested in being lenient." "What do you want to say in your statement?" "I want to make sure the judge understands the full scope of Rachel's deception. The affairs, the theft, the false allegations. I want her to receive the maximum sentence allowed by law. That could be up to 5 years in prison." "Good. Maybe that will give her time to think about what she's done." The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. Rachel had ultimately pled guilty to filing false police reports, perjury, and theft, hoping to avoid a trial that would have brought even more negative publicity. The courtroom was packed again, with reporters, curious onlookers, and several of Rachel's former clients who wanted to see justice done. Rachel's remaining friends stayed away, probably realizing that associating with her publicly would damage their own reputations. When it was time for victim impact statements, I walked to the podium and looked directly at Rachel before beginning to speak. "Your Honor, my name is Jack Ellis, and I am the primary victim of the defendant's crimes." Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes, but I could see her hands shaking as I spoke. "For 2 years, I believed I was married to a woman who loved and respected me. I worked hard to provide for our family. I was faithful and supportive, and I trusted her completely." I paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the courtroom. What I didn't know was that Rachel Ellis was living a double life. She was cheating on me with multiple men, stealing money from our joint accounts, and laughing about my ignorance with her friends. I could hear murmurs from the gallery, people reacting to the scope of Rachel's betrayal. When I discovered her affairs and filed for divorce, Rachel's response was to try to destroy my life completely. She fabricated evidence of domestic abuse, committed perjury, and attempted to have me arrested for crimes I didn't commit. Now I looked directly at Rachel, who was crying silently. Rachel Ellis is not a victim of circumstances or bad judgment. She is a predator who used her marriage as cover for criminal behavior. She stole from me, from her employer, and from her clients. She lied to courts, to police, and to everyone who trusted her. I could see the judge taking notes as I spoke. "I'm not asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for justice. Rachel Ellis needs to face serious consequences for her actions, not just to punish her, but to send a message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated." I returned to my seat as Rachel's lawyer made a final plea for leniency. He argued that Rachel had already suffered enough through the loss of her marriage, her career, and her reputation. But the judge wasn't persuaded. When he announced Rachel's sentence, the courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs. "Ms. Ellis, you have committed serious crimes that strike at the foundation of trust in our society. You have shown no genuine remorse and no understanding of the harm you've caused." Rachel was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 2 years. She was also ordered to pay restitution to me, her former employer, and her defrauded clients. As they led Rachel away in handcuffs, she finally looked at me again. This time, her expression was pure hatred, but I felt only satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked me how I felt about the sentence. "Justice has been served," I said simply. "Rachel made her choices, and now she's living with the consequences." That evening, I celebrated with Ray and Detective Harrington at a local bar. We toasted to justice, to friendship, and to the end of a difficult chapter in my life. "So what's next for you?" Ray asked. "I'm thinking about starting my own architectural firm," I said. "Maybe specializing in residential projects. I've learned a lot about building strong foundations." Detective Harrington raised his glass. "Here's to new beginnings and better judgment in choosing partners." "I'll drink to that," I said. As we sat there, I reflected on how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. I'd gone from being a naive husband who trusted blindly to a man who understood the importance of vigilance and self-protection. Rachel was beginning a 4-year prison sentence, Brent was facing federal charges and had fled the state, and Zoe was dealing with her own legal problems for helping stage the fake evidence. Meanwhile, I was free, vindicated, and ready to build a new life based on honesty and respect, rather than deception and manipulation. The rabbit had indeed become a wolf, and the hunt was finally over.